Can a book reach out and touch you? What if your next ebook could allow you to feel every page turn, maybe even the texture of the paper? In this episode of the Author Switch podcast, I'm going to be talking about haptic technology and how it might be the future of reading.
Are you an entrepreneur, small business owner, or consultant looking to boost your authority, influence, and impact? The Author Switch podcast with best-selling, award-winning author Carma Spence is your answer. Tune in for actionable advice, powerful strategies, and engaging interviews to turn on your author switch and take your business to the next dimension.
The Author Switch.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Switch podcast. My name is Carma Spence, and I help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, publish, and market their client attracting books so that they can grow their business. Now, in this particular episode of the Author Switch podcast, I'm going to do something a little bit different. A couple of weeks ago, I came across this article. I found it in Newswise, which is a press release distribution service that I follow because they have a lot of science information, and I love keeping up on the modern science news. And I came across this article about haptics that really piqued my curiosity. Here's just the opening paragraph. Haptic feedback stands as a cornerstone for the authenticity and depth of engagement in virtual reality and teleoperation systems. Yet, the existing haptic devices have grappled with the fidelity of replicating tactile properties, hindered by the constraints on their degrees of freedom and expressive range. This limitation has ignited an urgent quest for innovative solutions that can augment the responsiveness and adaptability of haptic systems. The article goes on to explain how this team of scientists have taken haptic technology to the next level. And as I was reading it, I thought, wouldn't that affect books, specifically ebooks? So I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I'm presenting to you in this episode a little bit of what I found out, my research, and how I think that it will affect the future of books, book marketing, and book sales. So first, just so that we're all on the same page, what is haptic technology? Here's an example of haptic technology. You take your phone and you push on it, and it pushes back. It vibrates. That is haptic technology. Haptic technology is basically adding a tactile sensation to your digital experience. It uses vibrations, pressure, other sensations, and it isn't just in your phones. If you've ever been to the Mars experience ride at Disneyland or Disney World, but specifically Disneyland is what I have in mind because the one at Disney World is a little bit different. As you're in, at least in the original, because I haven't been there in a while, but in the original Mars exploration ride at Disneyland, you're in a whole big auditorium and all of you go to Mars. Well, to help you experience the kickback of launching, your chair literally drops beneath you. I think they also raise the seat or something like that too, but these combinations of things simulate the sensation of a rocket launch. Well, that's what haptics is. Haptics is basically adding in these physical sensations to whatever experience you're having. So that's haptics. Now, how does this affect books? Well, what if your e-reader let you feel what it's like to turn a page? Or maybe feel the texture of paper? Or maybe even the weight of a book. I'm not sure how that works, but it was in the research. They mentioned that as a possibility. What if your book could interact with you in some way? Like you point something and it does something that makes you really pay attention to that point. Now, this can be done with lights and colors, but it can also be done with physical sensation. Educational application is the first place that people went with haptics. They thought, okay, how could haptics enhance the educational realm of books. And a lot of what people thought is that maybe the physical sensations could point out really important passages. So maybe you're reading and it vibrates when you touch that particular thing. I found one article that talked about how maybe if you're reading a physics textbook, you could actually experience the feel of gravitational pull. Again, I don't know how that works, but it sounds really cool. Another thing is it could emphasize points as you're reading something, although I think you'd have to be touching it in order for that to work. But that was another example is as you're reading it, it might, when you got to a certain passage, it might vibrate to tell you, hey, this is important. This is important. Read this again. Another application of haptics in reading would be for, especially for blind people, because it could mimic Braille. Now, why is this important? Because right now, blind people can listen to audiobooks. The problem is not everybody is an auditory learner, and that includes blind people. So I'm not an auditory learner. So when I hear stuff, if I don't interact with it, because I'm a kinesthetic learner, if I don't interact with it in some way, then I don't retain it. So, if you could create ebooks or even an audio ebook combination, you could give blind people the experience of not only hearing the book, audiobook, but they could read it in Braille. Now, it may not be the little bumps that traditional Brailles, it may be a digital Braille that they would have to learn, but still, this could open a whole new world for blind people who are not auditory learners. How cool would that be? And this was not mentioned in any of my research, but it is something I thought about. Now, people who are hard of hearing, who've lost their hearing, deaf people, I have a cousin who's deaf, often experience music and other sounds through the vibrations. In fact, I've heard stories of deaf people who will like touch the speaker when listening to music. They don't actually hear the music, but they feel the vibration and their brain translates that into music. Well, a book that digitally vibrates could add a layer of engagement for deaf people that's not there now. And also hearing people. And now here's where I found some really interesting research. And I'm actually going to read some of this because I don't want to get it wrong, but it's really fascinating research about the multi-sensory experience of physical books. Physical books. There's a reason why these have lasted so long. There is something to the experience of having a physical book that is different than any other experience. And there's scientific research that actually shows that reading something physical helps you learn better than reading something digital. So here's the research. I'm going to read this. Anne Magan did a research study in Norway in 2013. She had 10th graders of similar reading ability study a narrative passage. Some of it was fiction, some of it was nonfiction, and she had some of them read it in physical format on actual paper, and some of them read it in digital format on a PDF. Then they had to take a test about what they learned in the content, and they could refer back to the stuff they had just read in order to answer the questions. Despite that sort of cheat of being able to refer to the original content, people who read the digital content scored lower than the people who read it in physical content. And when they watched the people take the test, they found that people who had physical paper, they were able to find the information they needed much more quickly because they remembered physically where they found it on the page. Whereas people who were reading the PDF had a much harder time finding it because they couldn't locate the information. Interesting, yes? I just found that really, really fascinating. And what the conclusion was that there's a difference between remembering and knowing. And people remember things in multisensory. I remember reading something somewhere where sometimes we'll have an experience in one sensory. So, like we have an experience of taste, but what helps us remember it is sound. I don't know if you've had this experience. There are certain songs that have become attached to certain books or certain experiences because they were playing in the background, or perhaps you heard that song while remembering that experience. Our mind does not remember things in what you might think are logical things. Like it's a visual memory, therefore it should go in my visual memory belt. No, sometimes we remember visual things as an auditory thing. We remember taste things as a visual thing. Our brains are weird that way. And so when you take away some of that experience of reading and learning, you take away some of our ability to remember it. I thought that was really cool. So, how does haptics play into this? Haptics can start mimicking that physical experience, therefore adding a layer of interaction to an ebook that can make it approach the experience of a physical book. Now, at this point in time, I think it's only going to approach it asymptotically. I like to say asymptote. It's one of the few things I learned in, I think it was Trig. I don't think ebooks will ever equal the experience of a physical book, but they can get very close and maybe get close enough to affect how we learn. So, current developments in haptics, there are people who are experimenting with ebooks and haptics, and there's something called display books that is a relatively new technology that has recently gained popularity in ebooks. I don't know if it's come to an ebook near you, but it's out there, it's available, it's pretty cutting edge. But basically what it does is it helps readers using haptic feedback experience turning the page, page texture, that kind of thing. So it adds a layer of physicality to a digital book. What is the impact here? I think, and I'm not alone in thinking this, that haptics is going to help bridge the gap between physical books and ebooks. Right now, it is very clear there are people who will only read physical books, people who will only read ebooks, and people who will only listen to audiobooks. And then there are people who like the multimodality and may do two or more of those combination of three. I think that once haptics becomes more mainstream in ebooks, you might see a drop in physical book sales because some people who currently absolutely can't understand things without a physical book are now going to be able to have the same experience that they are looking for in an ebook. And ebooks are just, frankly, they take up a lot less space and they're easier to access. They're easy to take with you at wherever you are because an ebook can live on a Kindle version of your phone, on your iPad, on devices that are small and easy to take with you, whereas taking a bunch of these things is quite heavy. I know for sure because when I went to England a couple years ago, my husband and I went book shopping for one day. It was awesome. And we brought home a suitcase full of books. Rather heavy, but it was cool. He and I really love books. So, yeah, if ebooks could give me the physical sensation that I crave out of books, then I might make the transition. That also, it may enhance learning because now I know people who will buy a physical book and an audiobook, and then they'll take notes in the physical book and follow along in the physical book while they're listening to the audiobook. Well, what if you had the audiobook and the ebook synced together in your device with haptic technology? Now you can experience the book in like almost an augmented way because you're listening to it, you're reading it, you're feeling it all at the same time, synced together. And ebooks allow you to take notes. This could revolutionize how we experience, market, sell, create books. Now, it may be a little bit harder, especially right now, for indie publishers to take advantage of this. But if you've got the time and maybe some of the money, you can get this done right now. It's at the cutting edge, so it's not perfect yet. But think of the possibilities. Now, there are challenges to using haptic technology. Now, there are challenges to using haptic technology with ebooks. And the three main ones that are happening right now is cost. Haptic technology is still a bit expensive to develop. And it's a little expensive to have in your devices at the level that you would need for an ebook. The little bit of vibration that happens in your phone, not that big of a deal. However, the next challenge is battery life. The more vibration and pressure, that takes up a lot of battery space. It can heat up your device, it can cause your device to burn through your battery. That's going to be a problem that needs to be addressed. And there's a lot of further technology enhancement that need to happen for it to really give you that page turning, page texture, weight experience. Not to mention, one of the things I love about books is how they smell. I mean, I love going into a used bookstore and just smelling the books. I know that's weird. Haptics can't do that. And if you had a digital device that could give you that sensory experience, that would probably be a very expensive device, and it might even be a rather heavy one too. So I'm not sure that haptics will help ebooks take over physical books forever, but who knows what the future holds. I'm still holding out for my flying car. So that's this half of the podcast. After the break, I'm going to be talking about the future of haptics and publishing and comparing it to augmented reality and virtual reality. So stay tuned. I will see you on the other side. My name is Carma Spence, and I'm the author of Serve Up Your Book, a book about book marketing throughout the entire life cycle of your book, from before you start writing all the way to after you launch. A lot of authors don't think about book marketing until the book's already written. The problem with that is your book may sell or it may not. But if you bake marketing into your book from the get-go, you have a much better chance of reaching bestseller, of selling more books, and converting readers into clients. I think the most surprising thing that most authors that I've talked to who have read the book have found is the idea that book marketing starts before you even come up with your book idea. You bake the marketing in from the get-go. When you do that, you are much more likely to have success with your book. And most authors just don't think about it that early. Do you want to sell more books? Then read this book. Serve Up Your Book, available now on Amazon. Hello, and welcome back to the Author Switch podcast. My name is Carma Spence, and I am your host. I also help executive coaches, business leaders, and consultants write, publish, and market their client-attracting books so that they can grow their businesses with ease and grace. So, in the first half of this podcast, I was talking about what haptics is and how we can enhance the reading experience. In this half of the podcast, I want to turn my eyes a little bit towards the future and where haptics can take us in publishing. So, what's the future here? What are we looking at? Now, this is dreaming big. If haptics technology is able to go and reach its potential, ebooks could pretty much replace physical books and still enhance learning experience because you can remember where you were. Now, it may not be able to do everything. I don't know, but there's a possibility there. And then when you add on other technologies with it, or like syncing technology so that you can sync your ebook to an audiobook, or sync your haptic device ebook to a virtual experience with goggles. If you can add in multiple modalities, you could actually create books that actually felt like Walt Disney rides. Imagine this, a person experiencing your book physically, visually, in 3 dimensions with multiple sensory, and haptics plays a role in that. Because how we feel in our environment affects how we remember, how we learn, how we enjoy the experience or not enjoy it. So let's take a look at some of these other technologies and how they compare to haptics. Now, at the beginning of the episode, I talked about what haptics is. It's basically a technology that allows a digital device to mimic physical experiences using vibrations and pressure and temperature and things like that. The other two technologies that are also being looked at to enhance books are virtual reality and augmented reality. Now, it's easy to get those two things confused, so I wanted to define those as well. Virtual reality basically puts you visually into a 3D experience. Usually, you're wearing goggles that cover your eyes and your ears to block out the real world, and then you see a 3D experience. Now, this 3D experience could be an entirely new world, like you're in outer space, or you're in the Amazon jungle, or you're experiencing like you're completely somewhere else. Or, and this was in the commercials for the new Apple goggles, is it can create an experience within your living room. So you're seeing your living room to some degree, but you're also seeing your TV 5 times its size, or you're seeing other people in your living room who are not in your living room because they're wearing their goggles and we're all going into this virtual experience. Now, they may be experiencing you in their living room while you're experiencing them in your living room, but that's what virtual reality is. It creates a reality that is not in the real world. It's virtual and it's three-dimensional. Augmented reality layers on something technological onto reality. Now, probably the best example I've found is on Amazon. They have this for, like, let's say you're buying a piece of furniture. Basically, furniture, homewares, that kind of thing, anything that you might place in your house. I believe that Home Depot also offers this same technology, but basically what it does is you choose what it is you're buying, like a refrigerator or a table, and then you point your phone at the place where you want this object to be, and it analyzes the visuals and then places a virtual version of that object in the space so that you can get an idea. Will it fit? Will it look right? I used this technology maybe a couple of months ago because I was looking at buying a table that would go under another table. I know that sounds weird, but I wanted to increase the utility of that space, and I was looking at ways to do that. And there was this one table that I thought, I measured the space and I looked at the measurements of the table, but I really wanted to get a better idea. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I did it, and it didn't really work. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have this augmented reality tool at my disposal. Now, usually these are the other applications of this is there are apps that you can get on your phone where you can point it at a street or a store and it will give you directions to some other place you want to go from where you are. These are augmented reality. Now, a lot of people are using augmented reality in their books. Basically, it's adding audio visual additions to it. So what I was just describing is a really high-tech version of augmented reality, but I've used a low-tech version where I give you a QR code, so you can take your phone and you scan the QR code, and now you're taken to a video on YouTube, or you're taken to an article on my website. And a lot of authors are using augmented reality in that way. So that's the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality completely recreates reality in a space. Augmented reality layers stuff onto current reality. And haptics layers physicality onto current reality. Now, how could haptic technology affect book sales and book marketing and the future of books? Well, it holds the potential to revolutionize the publishing industry. It really does. If it reaches its potential and becomes affordable enough for non-big time publishers to use it. If only big time publishers can use it, number one, they're probably not going to use it that much because it's probably going to be too expensive. And even big publishers don't have deep pockets because the book industry just doesn't create that kind of wealth right now. Not yet, at least not for big publishers. It can create that kind of wealth for indie publishers, but Adding haptics right now may not add enough of that revenue for it to be worthwhile. It might not give you the ROI. But here are some things when I kind of like looked at the future and did some research. Here's some ideas of how haptic technology could potentially affect book sales and book marketing. First, it can enhance the experience engagement of readers with your book. So this is a good thing. What you can do is if you have a book that has this sort of haptic technology as a part of it, you can use it to say, hey, when you read my book, you'll have an enhanced experience because it will vibrate when XYZ. And you might even use the research I just shared with you where it says that having a physical experience with what you're reading helps you learn it better. It can differentiate you in a competitive market. If your book is using haptics and nobody else is, you're going to stand out, especially if that haptics is not just a bell and whistle that goes, "Hey, really cool." No, it needs to have a purpose and it needs to enhance the reading experience, adding value. Otherwise, there's just no point in using it. It can also appeal to new audiences. Now, remember how I was talking about how there's different types of readers who have preference for physical versus ebook versus audiobook? Well, when you have books with haptics, you might be able to attract some more people to your ebooks that would have never bought the ebook because they were physical book readers. So that's a new audience. And there might be audiences who don't even like reading, but now they're like, ooh, this is kind of like a video game. I want to experience it. Never know. You can create premium product lines. If you can incorporate haptics into what makes sense of your product offerings, then they're going to be more valuable. You might even have two versions of your ebook, one with and one without haptics. And the one with costs more because it costs more to create, but it also, you might be able to make it so that it has a higher income for you as well. Because it will have a higher perceived value. So even if they are both like cost you the same amount of money to produce, you could still charge more for the haptic version because it has a higher perceived value. There's personalization and customization opportunities because maybe your ebook has 5 different ways you can add haptics to it, and a person can choose which one or ones of those 5 so they create a personalized experience with your book. Now, this is very compelling to a lot of people. People want to feel like they're in control of their life. So why not in control of their ebook reading experience? It increases accessibility. Like I was talking about, it can mimic, maybe it's not actual Braille, maybe it's a digital version of Braille, but it could increase the accessibility of books to people who cannot read them with their own eyes and don't learn very well through auditory. It can boost reader retention and content stickiness. Like I was talking about, that physical experience. Number one, you might get people just like going, I like the way this feels. Turn the page. Ooh, turn a little dopamine hit every time they turn the page. Ooh. And it could also enhance learning because now they've got that physical sensation that helps them ground what they're reading. Now, this one could potentially be sketchy, but it also doesn't have to be. I mean, we're Google is already collecting our data. I mean, literally, this happened last year. I was having a conversation with my husband. We were not using our phones. We did not have the computer on. We were just having a conversation, and he was talking about how he wanted to get a pair of winter boots. The next morning, I hop onto Facebook, and guess what the first ad served to me was? Winter boots. My phone was listening to me and served up an ad. It thought I'd be interested. Now, it was women's winter boots, which is not going to help my husband because he doesn't wear women's winter boots. But I had never looked for winter boots. Why would it serve that ad for me? So Google's collecting data whether you like it or not. And I've turned off everything so that it's not supposed to be listening to me, but I know it is. It's a little spy on my house. But haptics could give you data about where are your readers engaging the most. It's kind of like creating a heat map within your book, only it's a physical heat map. A heat map is basically it's technology that watches where people's eyes go when they're reading a website, and then it shows you where are people spending the most time looking. Are they looking on the upper right or left or in the middle, or where are they spending the most time? It creates a heat map of where people are engaging with your website. Well, haptics could create a similar data set of your book. Where are people spending the most time? That could mean their increased interest, or it could mean that they're reading it over and over again because they don't understand it. So looking at the haptic map of your book could help you enhance the second edition. And of course, it creates cross-platform opportunities. Like I said, syncing an audiobook to a haptically enhanced ebook could really create a learning experience that's it's almost virtual reality. So there you go. My closing thoughts and predictions. I think the haptics is going someplace. And I think it's something that you need to be considering, maybe not now, but be open to it down the road. I think it really is going to become a part of the future of ebooks and digital products in general. Eventually, you might even be able to add haptics to your online courses. Haptics is kind of still in its infancy right now. I mean, it's got some applications, obviously, your phone uses it, and obviously Disney uses it, but it doesn't have widespread use yet. It's still early enough in its development that it's not widespread yet. But technology can evolve very quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 10 years we've got haptic ebook readers. So there you go. There's my thoughts on haptics and the future of ebooks. My name is Carma Spence, and this is the end of the Author Switch podcast. And I'm saying ciao for now. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Author Switch podcast. If you enjoyed today's show and want to support its mission, here's how to help. First, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your engagement helps my channel grow and reach more aspiring and established authors. Your ratings and reviews are invaluable. They help me reach more listeners and continue delivering top-notch content. To catch up on past episodes, including those no longer available on podcast platforms, visit authorswitch.com/episodes. There, you can choose to watch or listen to your favorite episodes at your convenience. If you'd like to show additional support, consider dropping a tip in the tip jar at buymeacoffee.com/Carma Spence. Your contributions help keep the podcast running and are greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a part of the Author Switch community. Until next time, keep writing.